Super. Hi, everybody. Thank you, first of all, for taking some time out of your lunch break to come and hang out with me. I appreciate that. Today, what I want to talk about, step back maybe from the super overtly technical, but I want to talk a little bit about Java-centric web development, perhaps a concept that oftentimes people don't necessarily correlate Java and web development together. So I want to talk about what that means and give you some of the advantages of what we would consider a single stack web development approach. So we'll jump right in. My name is Matthew Hawkins. I'm originally from the US. I work for a US-based company. We're out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. But a couple years ago, decided to jump ship, and I moved to Germany. I'm working at our office in Germany, so about 4 hours away from here. So I'm excited to be here and talking with you guys today. Our company is called Basis International. It's been around since before I was born, a good while before I was born. It started in 1985. And for about 20 plus years, 24 years, I believe, we've been working in the Java ecosystem. So we've been modernizing tools, helping companies develop tools. We've kind of had a lot of skin in that game now for quite a long time. We're working with quite a few large companies all across the globe, Fortune 100 companies, 400 companies, 30 countries, lots of different users out there. So it's an ecosystem that's not unfamiliar to us. Lots of different sectors. I've seen a lot of people actually, I guess they're one of the sponsors, one of the ING running around, and we've got a lot of banking stuff, technology out in banking as well. So cool to see that. Cool to get to talk with some of them. So that's what we do. Really quick, as people are filtering in, though, just since I've given you a little bit about me, I'm going to ask you guys to just all stand up real quick if you can. I know everyone hates it when I ask you to move. Just stand real quick. You'll get to sit back down in just a second, I promise. But if everyone can just stand up real quick for me, if you're able to, that would be great. And I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and as these questions relate to you, go ahead and sit right back down. Chances are they'll probably relate to you multiple times, but this just gives me an idea of who it is that I'm talking to here. So the first question is if this thing here kind of relates to you. If you're a developer, and this can relate to front-end or back-end developers, but if you're a developer who has had to learn a little bit about a JavaScript library just in order to kind of function within your business. Now, this can mean I am a front-end developer, or I'm a back-end developer who had to do this because I had to do this. So go ahead and sit down if this applies to you. I figured maybe I should have put that one at the end because I've got like 4 people left standing. If you want a little more exercise, you can go up and down a couple times here. The next one, and again, this perhaps might be more for those who have actually utilized some of these technologies, these web development technologies, but would be if as you're building a UI, or if you've done this in a personal project even, you struggle kind of with a consistent look and feel. If the tools that you use don't make a consistent look and feel kind of an easy thing. All right, a couple of you. Super, all right. Let's talk about this. So I'm at really primarily I'm a Java conference here, right? So I'm talking to a lot of back-end people. If you have to integrate with another team, a front-end team who takes care of those UIs, if you weren't all already seated, I have a feeling you probably would all be by now. And this could also be looked at from the other end. You have a front-end team who really has to do a lot of interaction with the back-end. A lot of you out there. And then finally, this is an interesting point as well. If you have in your workplace Java legacy applications that need modernizing, we've got a form that we're filling out at our booth for a raffle. And one of the questions on there is, do you have Java legacy applications that need modernizing? And I've never seen people so emphatically check yes before. There's a lot of frustration, it seems, around this particular topic. So great. I think everyone's seated. Maybe 1 or 2 people left standing. And if none of those applied to you, come find me afterwards, because I'm curious to hear what it is that you do then. Super. So here's kind of what I wanted to chat about today. I want to talk about some of the challenges that a modern application developer is going to face as they want to kind of bring an application to the web, and that can look like a couple different things. But there are some really common challenges out there that we've heard, especially a lot in our company as we work with our clients. Then I want to talk about kind of addressing these challenges and some of the simplicity that can be introduced into your development process when you are trying to minimize as many other technologies as possible. So more of a single technology approach as close as possible. Again, I actually just added this in recently because of the overwhelming feedback here, but I want to talk a little bit about the decision-making process and kind of the different places people can be at as they look at modernizing their existing legacy Java applications. And I want to talk then about the tool that I'm here to talk about. I don't want to get fired, so I do at least eventually have to talk about what it is I'm here to promote, and mention a success story from one of our longtime developers who started using our tool. And then very briefly, what I'll do is I'll look at some example code and kind of some resulting screenshots from the application built with that code. I don't want to dive too much into that in this context, but if you are curious to get into the nuts and bolts technical details, want to see more examples of live code that's running, applications like that, please feel free to visit our booth. We're booth number 22, right in between the boxing and the beer. It's a really interesting place to kind of be stuck in between. So feel free to come chat with us, and we'll look a little more into the technical side there as well. So as we jump into those problems that I talked about, all right, as a modern, especially web application developer, or application developer in general, what are some of the problems that you kind of run into? And the first one will be a choice overload. And this can mean a couple different things. The first thing, yes, there's just an overwhelming number of technologies that are out there. But even more so than what are the number, how many, what's the exact number of technologies available is, what's the complexity that you're starting to introduce into your program as you start to branch out and adopt all of these different things, necessarily or unnecessarily. On top of that, again, as you have these extra technologies that are part of your program, that oftentimes means that a developer doesn't get just to focus on something. A lot of their time will be spent making sure that they are staying current on how all of these different technologies work, how they play together. I know, having talked with some of you at the booth, that can start to feel almost like a full-time job. And so the goal here being maybe reduce the amount of homework, continuous education that you have to do on all of this stuff. And for a lot of reasons, but for those two reasons especially, it can make it more complex to maintain your competitive edge. And you want to do that when you're building an application, whether that's a public-facing application or whether this is some sort of internal tool that you're using. You want to create the best application that you can to enable the people that you're working for to be competitive in whatever field that they're in. So this is kind of the first suite of problems, just kind of general problems here that a developer might be facing. So we'll do this. I haven't had enough water. Sorry. But I wanted to take a look at something that I found interesting as I was kind of looking up graphics that might be interesting to show. And this one popped up. And I thought this was interesting for a couple different reasons. First one here, we're looking at just some of the different layers that you have to think about as you're developing your application. And there's a lot of interesting Java stuff on here that people will, I'm sure, be way more knowledgeable than I am about. But then you take a look at that presentation layer, your UI layer, and there's a particular language kind of technology that's missing, and it's the one that I think a lot of people here are very enthusiastic about. And so the ones that you do see, the other interesting thing, we're seeing a lot of JavaScript flavor things up there. And that's the default thing that you think of when you think of presentation layer, and for good reason. No argument necessarily against that, but you go right to that JavaScript stuff. And so I thought that this was interesting. And so let's say, okay, this represents kind of the normal set of tools that someone here might consider using, or a subset of them, certainly a subset of them. And so you go ahead and decide for that presentation layer. Let's go ahead and go with one of those non-Java UI frameworks. Whether or not you are the one who's actually developing that, but oftentimes if you're just one of the guys trying to keep up with what they are doing, you'll start to experience JavaScript fatigue. And I think some of you probably know what I'm talking about here. JavaScript it's a beast. There's a lot of stuff going on out there, and so it can tire you out if you're really trying to make sure that you're staying current on the latest and greatest stuff happening. If you're doing something this way, there also likely is going to be multiple team involvement. So meaning you can't just let one team do everything. These guys are going to have to talk to one another. And even if everybody gets along and there's no human emotions that get in the way, there can often be issues when you're trying to synchronize their work. Finger pointing can start to happen. Managing those teams can get difficult. So that's definitely an issue. And that can also make things like debugging your program, maintaining your program difficult, because is it these guys over here who need to worry about this? Or is it these guys over here who need to worry about this? So when you follow, I think, what most people would consider these days the kind of traditional separation of concerns pattern, not that that's a bad thing at all, there are certainly advantages, but there are disadvantages as well that are important to be aware of. And to kind of boil these two things down, because yeah, it's not all just, oh, well, complexity is a bad thing. There are a couple types of complexity. There's essential complexity and accidental complexity. So essential complexity, listen, we're in 2024. It's not easy to build a modern web application. There are certain things that will be difficult just because that's what it's like to build applications in 2024. My boss gave a similar talk at one of the last conventions, and he showed an application that he wrote in like 30 lines, character-based application that he would have done when he started doing his programming, I believe in the 80s. Yeah, okay, there's not going to be as many moving parts to that. So yes, there's complexity that's unavoidable, certainly. But what happens oftentimes, as you start to try to tie all of these other things in, you look, how do I include this microservice and learn about this technology and get all this stuff in, is accidental complexity. And that's what we're trying to reduce, that's what we're trying to avoid. It's that unintentionally included set of things that really make projects more difficult to accomplish because of the number of things that you're including. So just a note there to keep in mind. So what's an alternative then? What's an alternative? Our option here that we're presenting is that presentation layer, that UI, it's a inconsequential layer. I mean, there's work that needs to go into creating a good UI, and that's doable in the same language and kind of the same stack as a lot of those other layers. So you can either choose your JS front end and then your Java backend, or you can do both of those things directly in Java. So that's the alternative that we recommend, or at least that we're here recommending for a few different reasons. And want to talk about then some of those benefits for implementing more of a single stack approach. So of course, now if you decide I'm going to write my UI in Java, I have a Java web development tool that lets those developers actually take the reins and start going. You don't have as many accidental complexities introduced into your project. And it really lets you focus on your expertise. Again, something that we noticed having been kind of in the Java ecosystem with our company for as many years as we have been is we've got a lot of really smart Java developers who would have no problem making UIs and who have a really good knowledge of how to link their business logic, their backend stuff to a front end. They really just don't want to have to go out there and learn a whole new kind of, not scary, that's not the right word, but can be overwhelming ecosystem. So you've got some really smart engineers who can focus in their expertise then and use that to build a really powerful application. Oops. And this helps you streamline that competitive edge then that we talked about. If you've got a smaller subset of employees or of developers who are able to create those mission critical applications, those business applications, kind of with the expertise that they have, that lets you stay competitive much more easily. And I mentioned team size. These three things all sort of go together here, but when you keep that team size smaller, when you reduce the number of inputs, then the communication is definitely also way better, just by definition, right? And that will increase your team cohesion as well. So that's an important thing. A lot of developers want to just be able to develop with the group of people that they know and don't want to have to deal with, oh, what are those guys doing over there? I talked a little bit about modernizing existing applications, and so I wanted, hopefully, this I wasn't sure if this was going to look great on the movie theater screen. Hopefully you can see it, and if not, I'm very sorry. I'm happy to show you at the booth. But this represents what we consider, or what we've boiled down, a very generic kind of modernization decision path to look like. A lot of people still running Java applications, some in the character world, but certainly in things like Swing or FX. And so you first ask yourself, are we even going to bother modernizing this thing in the first place or not? You can just even replace the application in its entirety. That can be costly, that can be risky. It can introduce some lack of flexibility if you don't have quite as much control. So then you go back and you say, okay, well, should we modernize? Well, if not, I don't really think I need to expand too much on the problems of not updating or modernizing applications. I mean, that's a decision that you've got to make. But if you decide, yep, all right, time to go ahead and start looking at modernizing this thing. So here we started with Swing, and then we said, all right, well, you could modernize but stay on kind of in the desktop world, so you go with FX. And it's an improvement, but maybe not as much of an improvement as somebody would like. So we hop back on the decision tree, and this is kind of the crux that I'm talking about here today. Do we decide to branch out and use other technologies, or do we stick pretty much just in Java? If you say no, there can still be a fantastic end result. And in many ways, I'm not up here to say that that there isn't a lot of benefits, some performative benefits and everything to that separation of concerns, to having a JavaScript flavor front end and a Java backend. But it can also be riskier if your company isn't really set up to make sure that that can happen really flawlessly and seamlessly. But that can certainly absolutely get you to the same end goal. However, if you want to really fully utilize that team of Java developers that you have, the expertise there, you can use a Java UI framework. I have only put my company's products logo up here. There are others, but certainly that will allow you to get to that modern, scalable, responsive UI that you're after, and avoid some of the scariness of going and using some of the JavaScript stuff that's out there. So again, I'll just briefly, I'm really not trying to drill too much into the technical aspects here, more the design decisions, but my product that I'm here to represent is called Web4j. And as the name implies, we're bringing the web to Java. And so all I've done here is just included just a screenshot from a customer maintenance application, but that is written purely in Java. And the idea here being that this lets your Java developers create something that's perfectly acceptable without having to hand that over to a third party. It puts the control back in the hands of your Java UI developers. And so this, I wanted to talk just a little bit here today about one of the success stories from one of our customers. He's been in the business for a really long time, certainly around the 20 years that we've been in Java. And he has an application with lots of complex backend business logic because it has to deal with the US health insurance system. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you guys how much of a headache that probably is, our infamous healthcare system. And back around, I believe it was 2010 or 2011, right around when Angular was kind of beginning to gain popularity, right around when it came out, I believe. He said, all right, time to modernize this thing. I want to use Angular to build my front end. And so the first thing that he did is said, well, can I ask my existing team to do this? He had people who were doing Java Swing, some GWT, so he had Java developers. He didn't have a whole lot of, he didn't have any JavaScript guys. So he said, all right, I will find a contractor to do this. I believe he found a company, an Indian company, to help him first, and had them kind of get started on modernizing this thing. And so he was receiving invoices for the work that they were doing and receiving invoices for the work that they were doing, and he realized a couple different things. The first thing he realized was that he was getting charged a lot and wasn't seeing a whole lot of results. And this wasn't necessarily a reflection on them, but his Java logic was complex, and that wasn't necessarily something that that front-end team was going to be able to just pick up and run with like that. The other thing he realized is it was hard for him then, realizing this, to dig in and decide as a decision maker, as the guy kind of running this show, what am I being charged for here? Should I be paying this much? Because he wasn't sure about what was going on that side either. So he decided, all right, well, it could just be a one-off. I believe after that, he went to a company in Eastern Europe to try to help do this. Same thing, he was running the same issues, and then he went to 2 or 3 in the States, and the same thing. He was really just kind of frustrated, and this thing never, the renovation of this application never really got off of the ground. So just a little while ago, we had a convention in the States. Our company had a convention where we introduced this product to everybody, and Glenn, the guy I'm talking about here, was in attendance. And normally in conventions, Glenn is a very nice man, normally not the most enthusiastic or happy to sit there and listen to us talk, not always sitting in the back just like smiling and laughing at everything that we're saying. But it was really cool. I was actually kind of up on the stage as we were starting to present this, and it was cool to see him really happy and excited about something, because all of a sudden I think it dawned on him, hold on a minute, this might be a way for me now to upgrade this application, to modernize this application, to take that control back, and really kind of get to where he had been trying to get for years and years, a decade. So enthusiastic, in fact, that he and his wife were supposed to be going on a vacation during the time the convention was over, but we had started training the very next day. And so I woke up at the hotel. I was getting ready to go down for the first day of training, and I ran into his wife in the hallway, who was getting ready to go play a game of tennis with her friends because her husband had just canceled their second week of vacation because he wanted to stick around and train on how to use this product that's going to totally help him overhaul and upgrade his application. So I just thought that was cool. It was cool to see a real kind of human response to gaining the control back over modernizing the application. And so far, I think he told us just recently he's gotten way more work done. He believes in the last few months than he ever felt that he did in the time that he was working with those other contractors. So I thought that was cool. I want to quickly here talk then a little more quantifiably about some comparisons. We asked a developer of ours who's working at our German office if he would kind of do a comparison. He came from a React development background. And so we asked him to just create a very small and very simple CRUD application using React and Spring, and then also create one using WebForge as the UI layer, or Web4j, sorry, our UI framework. And so I'm not going to go through every kind of minutia, little step here, but these were kind of the different things that we asked him to do. Set up the project, get your database going, and then use the UI tool that we've asked you to use for each of these things to build the interface. Style it, implement the backend, and then deploy it. So for those of you who are curious about the nitty-gritties, you can read what it is that he did here. But we asked him to try to come at it from as objective a position as he could. You know, he's still one of our employees, so take it with a grain of salt, certainly. But he is an enthusiastic React developer. He likes the product, and he had never used our tool, of course, before he came to work with us. And I think he was kind of secretly hoping that this would let him maybe go do a lot more React work at our job. So I'll show you here real quick. Nothing fancy. This is not a crazy big application. This is really just kind of a small example. But what we were able to do is very simply get a similar look and feel for just these two little applications. So there is interaction with the database here. This will do CRUD or CRUD functionality. Nothing crazy. But what was interesting for us, the results here, were pretty cool. It was cool to see. So when we look at the total number of lines of code just present in the application itself, when he used React, we were at roughly, so 889 lines of code, 376 for our tool. Now, there's scaffolding involved, of course. I believe I don't know whether he used Create React App. I'm not exactly sure how he scaffolded his React project. He started with a very basic template from ours. So when you remove kind of that bootstrapping, that scaffolding that's going on there, there were 562 lines written specifically by him to get this application up and running in React, and then 284 in our tool. And so with just total lines of code, we're looking at a 60% fewer lines just of application code, 50% fewer lines written. So direct kind of productivity gain there. So when we asked him, all right, give us the number of hours, give us an estimate of how long this took you. For the React and Spring side, he landed 4.5, 5 hours, and then using our tool, it was a little closer to 2.5 or 3. So we're looking at a 40% gain there. And this was cool for us to see for a couple different reasons. Of course, we don't want to tell Java developers, well, it's going to be worse to use this thing from productivity standpoint in order to compete with these JavaScript frameworks. So we were saying, all right, well, at least it's got to be similar here. And then when we saw, we can actually kind of make things more concise. We might even be able to speed up productivity time here, again, from a small application. That was pretty cool for us. That can change as you increase the size, most certainly, but that was heartening to see. That was pretty cool to see. So how's this thing look? What's the code look like? I know that I'm at a developer conference, so I do want to give you guys a little bit of this. Like I said, if you're curious to dive more headfirst into how the code looks, what some of these applications look like, feel free to come stop by. But this is just a tiny example. For those of you who might have done FX or the Swing, this is not probably an unfamiliar looking chunk of code, but this little snippet here is basically all you are going to need to do to create a simple counter application like this. So this should feel very at home for a Java developer. This should feel like something that they can do, that you guys can do. I haven't touched on it much, but it is also possible to write Kotlin code. I know that we have JetBrains here, and there are a lot of Kotlin enthusiasts running around as well, so fully able to do all of your development in Kotlin as well. We've got one of our own developers who's running around here who's a Kotlin enthusiast, and he's quite happy that he can do that in Kotlin as well. So I didn't want to forget to mention that also. So just again, a really quick sample here of a little application just to take a peek at some code. The next thing I want to look at really quickly here is just a sample dashboard that we created in use at that you could use in a traditional business application. And so something like this really oftentimes is maybe not as complex, but from a UI perspective, something like this would be really cool to be able to do in Java. It looks modern. It looks like something that you'd expect to see in a real business application. And this was all done in Java. I've actually got, again, the code that built this. This is just a screen cap, but I've got the code up and running live at our stand if you're curious to kind of take a look and poke around at it and look. I didn't get the whole thing in here. So yeah, feel free to come take a peek. But we thought this kind of represented something that a lot of Java developers wouldn't necessarily immediately consider Java when you're creating. And this is absolutely possible with the framework and the tool that we've created. So I wanted to save a little bit of time for questions. I might have run a little bit short here, but thanks. That's what I have for you guys today. We will be having a webinar. I believe on October 29th, our CEO is going to go through some of what I just spoke about, a deeper dive, most certainly, into the product. He said, doing Java web migration without creating a tech soap opera. I thought that was interesting. So if you are curious about that, you can register for that either at our booth or hop on the website. And yeah, that's what I have for you today. So feel free. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has some. And other than that, thank you guys for spending some of your lunch with me today. I appreciate it. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead. So it's not transpiled, that much I can tell you for sure. A lot of the overtly technical things, I will be perfectly upfront. I'm not the biggest Java expert in the world. I can probably give you some of that information, but I would probably, if you want to come visit me at my booth, I've got better a technical heavy hitter there who can probably answer that question. But no, it's not a it doesn't transpile at all. Something perhaps like GWT, kind of that paradigm. It's not quite like that. It's not that same paradigm. Yeah, good question.
All systems are nominal. Initialize Genesis sequence.